I want you to do something for me. Just wherever you are right now, whether you're commuting, doing the dishes, or just kind of staring at the ceiling, just focus in for a second.
Yeah, just take a breath and center yourself.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine a sound. Pay very close attention to what I'm describing. Imagine the rhythmic, heavy, wet slapping sound of wet clay.
Like it's spinning rapidly on a potter's wheel.
Right, exactly. Just that wet, earthy thwack. And right underneath it, if you tune your ear to the lower frequencies, I want you to imagine a steady, low thud of a human heartbeat, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the clay.
It's a very visceral image, almost uncomfortably intimate.
It really is. And, for thousands of years, these ancient, archaic texts have boldly claimed that this exact material, this wet terrestrial mud, is the structural blueprint of your actual body.
Which is something we usually just write off, right?
100%.
Yeah.
We read ancient texts and we immediately expect primitive poetry. We expect these sweeping, mystical metaphors about the human soul.
Right, we think, oh, what a beautiful, quaint allegory, coming from the earth and returning to the earth.
Exactly. But today, we are throwing that assumption entirely out the window.
Yeah.
We're looking at this brilliant essay by J.R. Ahmed. It's titled The Clay and Fire Dialectic. And, it presents this radical, completely paradigm-shifting thesis.
It really forces a total reevaluation of how we read these historical documents.
It does, because Ahmed argues that these ancient texts are not using poetry at all. They are actually using structural definitions. They are giving us a rigid, mathematical, and thermodynamic blueprint of human biology.
Which completely bridges the gap between theology and physics.
Yes. And the wildest part is, if you violate the physics of that blueprint, you don't suffer some sort of mystical, magical punishment from the sky. You suffer a mechanical collapse.
Right. We have this habit in the modern era of building a massive, impenetrable wall between the language of the ancients and the language of modern science.
Well, completely. Like they're two totally different worlds.
Exactly. We treat them as non-overlapping domains, like science is where we get our physics, our thermodynamics, our biology, and ancient texts are where we get our moral fables.
But Ahmed's premise says, no, wait, in this specific framework, moral failure, the collapse of a civilization, the destruction of a society, these are mechanical consequences.
It is physics, it is thermodynamics. We are exploring a closed-loop system here. And, well, if you want to understand how a physical system inevitably collapses, you first have to understand the raw materials it was built from.
Which brings us back to the mud. The source text describes humanity's origin with incredible specificity. Ahmed quotes the Quran's description, which states that humanity is created from sounding clay, from dark, altered mud.
The Arabic phrase used there is amma masnun.
Right, and when you hear that wet squish of the mud, the water dripping, that heartbeat in your mind, you realize just how incredibly grounded this concept is. It is not some ethereal, glowing light. It is dirt.
It's very tactile.
It is. But if I am reading this as a systems analyst, I immediately have a problem.
Okay, what's the problem?
Well, if I am supposed to be a dynamic, thinking, moving system, clay seems like a pretty passive material to use as a blueprint. It just sits there, does not generate energy. How does a lump of wet earth translate to the complexity of the human condition?
Well, that's because it is a very specific type of earth. You have to look at its functional identity. We have to shift our perspective from, poetry to structural engineering.
Okay, I'm with you. Make me an engineer.
If you talk to a geologist or a material scientist, they will tell you that clay is not just generic dirt. It is actually a highly complex nanomaterial.
Wait, really? A nanomaterial?
Yes. At the molecular level, it's incredibly complex. Ahmed's essay argues that clay is the absolute perfect structural analogy for the human organism because it possesses 3 essential defining systemic properties.
So these are functional thermodynamic realities that define how we operate.
Exactly. And the first of those properties is absorption.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of that. What actually happens at a molecular level when clay encounters water?
Unlike a piece of plastic or solid quartz, which, simply gets wet on the surface, clay is composed of microscopic, flat plates. They're called silicate sheets.
So it's layered.
Very layered. And when water is introduced, the water molecules literally slide between those microscopic plates. The water enters the molecular structure itself. The clay absorbs it, holds it, and expands.
Oh, wow. So it's not just holding water on the outside, it takes it inside.
Right. And Ahmed connects this structural absorption directly to the human intellect. Our minds, biologically and psychologically, are fundamentally designed to absorb.
We take in the water of the universe around us.
Yes. Data, context, history, relationships, emotional nuance. We take all of that
Hmm.
and we integrate it into our very structure.
I was looking at the neuroscience of how learning actually works to prepare for this deep dive, and it tracks perfectly with this.
Oh, the neuroplasticity aspect.
Exactly. When you learn something new, your brain doesn't just passively store a file like a computer hard drive. It undergoes physical chemical changes.
It literally rewires itself.
Right. You have synaptic pruning, where weak connections are eliminated, and you have long-term potentiation. That's where neurons that fire together literally wire together. You are physically absorbing the environment and changing the shape of your neural pathways.
Which is exactly what the clay is doing with the water. So, in this thermodynamic framework, a human being is functionally clay.
And if a person refuses to learn, if they operate purely on dogma or refuse to take in new evidence,
They are going against their structural blueprint.
they are a dry sponge.
Exactly. They are denying the fundamental physics of their own mind. And that refusal to absorb has devastating consequences for the second property of clay, which is malleability.
Let's unpack malleability,
Okay.
because it's connected to the water, right?
It is entirely dependent on the water. Because clay absorbs water deeply into its molecular structure, those water molecules act as a lubricant between the silicate plates.
So that's what gives it that squishy, workable feel.
Yes, this is what gives clay its incredible plasticity. It can be shaped, reshaped, smoothed out, and refined under pressure. It yields.
Which is the total opposite of a rock.
Right. Think about applying pressure to a solid rock.
If you apply intense pressure to a piece of granite, it just resists. It resists until it hits its failure point, and then it fractures. It violently breaks.
But if you press your thumb into wet clay,
The clay yields to the pressure. It learns the shape of your thumb, and it adapts. It survives the pressure by changing its form.
and in Ahmed's essay, this perfectly mirrors our capacity for adaptation, for empathy, and for moral development.
Because we are not fixed constructs.
Exactly. We have the ability to recognize a flaw in our behavior, encounter resistance or friction in our lives, and smooth it out. We can be molded by experience.
We can actually change our minds when presented with new evidence.
But if you lose your malleability, you lose your ability to survive in a dynamic universe. You become rigid, and rigid things break.
That connects so beautifully to the third property. We have absorption, we have malleability, and the third one is cultivation.
Yes, cultivation is where the system starts producing outward results.
If you look at clay, particularly like nutrient-rich mud, it is the fundamental medium for life on this planet. It holds the water, it holds the nutrients, and it provides the exact structural support a root system needs to anchor itself.
Seeds germinate in it.
Right? A sheer rock face cannot grow a forest, and a puddle of pure water cannot anchor an oak tree. You need the mud.
Ahmed argues that the human mind and human society are designed for exactly this kind of cultivation. We do not just absorb data and adapt our behavior in a vacuum purely for our own survival.
We take in the raw seeds of potential and we grow them.
Exactly. We cultivate complex ethical frameworks. We cultivate art, agriculture, science, civilization. The human being is the soil from which the future grows.
So when you synthesize those three things, absorption, malleability, and cultivation, you get intellect, adaptation, and civilization building.
Clay is the grounded, rational, transparent dimension of who we are.
And this brings us to a crucial foundational concept in the text that Ahmed highlights, which is the Khalifa.
Yes, the Khalifa. In this ancient framework, humans are given this very specific title. It translates roughly to the conscious manager, the steward, or the vicegerent of the terrestrial system.
The manager of the planet.
Right. And the essay points out that we are only qualified for this immense responsibility because we possess those three clay-like properties.
Think about what a manager actually has to do on a practical level.
A good manager has to be able to absorb incoming data from the environment. They have to adapt to sudden changes and cultivate the growth of the systems under their care.
You could not give the management of a dynamic planet to something that is entirely rigid.
Like an angel operating on pure, fixed programming.
Right. And you couldn't give it to something purely chaotic either. You have to give it to the clay.
You need the grounded structure.
But I have to push back here for a second because there is a phrase in the text that you mentioned earlier that actually bothers me.
Which phrase?
The quote said, "Humanity was made from dark, altered mud. Amamas noon." Why the word altered? I mean, if I go outside right now and scoop up a handful of dirt from my backyard, it doesn't build a civilization.
That's a fair point.
It feels like the word altered is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Doesn't that imply we aren't just raw Earth?
That is the exact detail that elevates this from a mythological story to a biological reality. The clay described here is not raw, it is highly processed.
Okay, processed how?
The Arabic word implies a substrate that has been transformed over a very long period of time. It indicates that human consciousness and human biology emerge from a massive, long chain of biological preparation.
Wait, so we are talking about geological time here.
Precisely. Think about what it takes the Earth to actually make clay. It is not instantaneous. You need solid rock to weather down over millions of years, subjected to wind, rain, and ice.
It has to be ground down to dust.
Yes. Then, that mineral dust has to mix with organic matter. The decay of previous life forms, bacteria, microscopic organisms, it has to be hydrated, compressed, folded into the earth.
So the human body, our biology, is the result of an incredibly long, dynamic, evolving recipe.
We are the pinnacle of this earthly refinement process. We didn't just, pop into existence out of nowhere as a finished product. We are the cultivated output of the planet itself.
Okay, I'm with you. I understand the blueprint.
Very good.
The clay is our rational structure, our biology, our stabilizing force.
The hardware, basically.
Right, the hardware. But returning to my systems analysis, a stabilizing structure is not enough.
No, it's not.
If I have a beautifully sculpted lump of wet clay sitting on a workbench, nothing happens. I mean, it just sits there, completely inert. In physics and thermodynamics, every single system requires a counterforce to generate movement.
You need a differential.
Yes. If you want work to be done, you need an energy gradient. You need heat. If clay is the structure, what is powering the engine?
To understand the engine, we have to flip the script entirely. We have to introduce the systemic opposite of the clay.
Okay, where are we going?
We have to look at the John.
Okay, if you are listening to this, I want you to imagine the audio landscape shifting dramatically in your head.
Forget the wet clay.
Yeah, forget the soothing, wet heartbeat of the mud. You are hearing something completely different now. Imagine a sharp, static-filled spike. A loud crackling sound.
Like a high-voltage wire.
Yes, exactly. It sounds like intense heat, but without a flame.
Yeah.
Just a buzzing, restless, irritating, high-frequency energy. That is the counterforce we are talking about.
The author points to the texts describing the John, which is an entity or force created before the clay. And the text says the John emerged from smokeless, scorching friction.
Smokeless, scorching friction. That is such a specific phrase.
It is, and we need to pause here and strip away centuries of mythology, because when people hear John or Jinn, they think of folklore.
Right. We are not talking about magical genies and brass lamps granting wishes here.
Not at all. Ahmed is reading this as pure thermodynamics. We are talking about the systemic, energetic opposite of structural clay.
So let's define the thermodynamics here before we apply it to human behavior. The first law of thermodynamics says energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed.
Right. And the second law?
The second law says that in any closed system, entropy or chaos always increases. Heat naturally disperses. Heat is volatile. Heat wants to spread out and consume whatever it touches.
Exactly. So let's look at the contrast between the clay and the smokeless friction point by point. Where clay is fundamentally stable and grounded, fire is volatile and unanchored.
It constantly seeks to rise.
Yes, to escape, to dissipate its energy into the surrounding environment.
And where clay is reflective and absorbs things into itself, like we talked about with the water fire, is reactive.
It bounces off its environment.
It doesn't take things in to learn from them. It consumes them to fuel its own reaction.
And where clay cultivates life holding the seed, providing the nutrients, fire destroys the seed. It burns the very potential that the clay is trying to protect.
So how does this abstract thermodynamic concept map onto my actual everyday human experience? Like, what is the fire inside of me?
Ahmed dives into the linguistics to explain this, specifically looking at phonosemantics.
Let's clarify that term for the listener. What is phonosemantics?
Phonosemantics is this fascinating field of linguistics. It suggests that the very sounds of a root word carry an inherent visceral meaning, regardless of how the word evolves over time.
Like the sound itself has data.
Exactly. The Arabic root for this fiery counterforce is JNN, and linguistically that root universally signifies concealment, or something that is hidden from sight.
Is heat.
Right. So systemically, Ahmed argues that this smokeless fire represents our hidden internal emotional impulses. These are the powerful drives operating beneath the surface of our conscious, rational logic.
We were talking about ego.
Ego, rage, lust, arrogance, paralyzing fear.
All those deep gut-level drives.
Yes, and they are smokeless because you cannot see them. Think about it. If you put a person in an fMRI machine, you can see blood flow. You can see electrical synapses firing.
But you cannot isolate arrogance as a physical object in the brain.
No, it is completely hidden. But you can absolutely feel its heat. You can feel the destructive friction it generates in a person's life when they are driven by pure ego.
The analogy that immediately jumps into my mind is a computer.
Okay, let's hear it.
The clay is my conscious mind typing a document. It is structured, it is rational, it is producing work. I am the manager of the computer.
That's the Khalifa property.
Exactly.
Okay.
But suddenly my computer fan starts screaming. The laptop gets physically hot to the touch. The battery's draining by 1% every 30 seconds. My typing
The
lags.
system is struggling.
Right. So I pull up the activity monitor, and there is some hidden background process, some malware or some broken code that I didn't even know was running. And it is eating up 90% of my CPU.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The background process is concealed. It is the JNN. It is generating intense, smokeless friction.
And most dangerously, it is overriding my conscious commands. The heat is taking over the machine.
The energy is unregulated.
But wait, I have to challenge the premise here.
Go ahead.
If this essay is setting up clay as the good, rational hero, and fire as the evil, destructive villain, that feels, I don't know, overly simplistic.
How so?
Well, fire is the foundation of human civilization. We use fire to cook food, to survive the winter, to forge steel. If I don't have fear, I don't run from a predator.
That's true.
If I don't have a little bit of ego or aggression, I don't stand up for myself or build a business. So why is the heat of the John treated as a purely negative force in this text?
That is a critical distinction, and you are absolutely right to point it out. Ahmed's essay does not frame fire as inherently evil.
It does.
No. This is all about systems management. As you said earlier, a system needs an energy gradient to do work. You need the heat of ambition, the heat of fear, the heat of passion, to bake the clay, to give it purpose, to create movement.
So where does it go wrong?
The difference between a thriving civilization and a collapsed ash heap is entirely about regulation. Think about the difference between a kiln and a forest fire.
Okay, walk me through that.
A kiln uses intense, contained heat to transform wet, fragile clay into durable ceramics. The heat is regulated by the structure. The clay is the master of the fire.
It's contained. It has a purpose.
Right. But a forest fire is unregulated heat. It consumes everything, providing no structural benefit whatsoever. When our hidden drives, our ego, our greed, our anger become unregulated, they stop being the engine of our system and they become parasitic.
They start burning the fuel indiscriminately.
They begin to consume the very clay they were meant to energize.
Oh, they evaporate the water.
Exactly.
If the fire in my mind gets too hot, my ability to absorb new information dries up. My malleability, my neuroplasticity hardens. I can't cultivate anything because I'm too busy feeding the fire of my own ego.
That is exactly the mechanism, and this dynamic explains the central archetype of rebellion in these ancient texts.
You mean the figure of Iblis?
Yes, Iblis, or Satan in the Western tradition. The text explicitly states that Iblis emerges from this volatile substrate of smokeless fire. In the narrative, when the human is created from clay, Iblis is commanded to acknowledge or submit to this new creation.
And he flat out refuses.
He refuses.
It's the classic story of pride. He basically says, I'm made of high-energy fire. He is made of heavy, wet mud. I am superior. I will not bow.
But if we read it through the lens of thermodynamics, as Ahmed insists we must, it completely changes the meaning.
It takes the morality out of it and replaces it with physics.
Yes. It is no longer just a quaint moral fable about the dangers of being arrogant. It is a description of physical law. It is the literal, physical refusal of raw, unregulated emotion to submit to disciplined, structured intellect.
Fire, by its very physical nature, refuses to be anchored.
It refuses to submit to the heavy, wet structure of clay. The Iblis archetype is not a magical sprite whispering evil thoughts in your ear. It is the ultimate, unregulated background process.
It is pure, chaotic volatility refusing to be managed.
Exact.
That is profound.
Right.
I mean, so within every single human being listening to this right now, we have this incredible, constant dialectic going on.
We are a walking thermodynamic equation.
We have the biological hard drive, the malleable, rational clay that wants to learn, absorb, and grow, and we have the high-energy, volatile fire of our drives and impulses.
And when the clay regulates the fire, we get art, we get justice, we get progress.
But when the fire overrides the clay, we dry out. We lose our humanity. We calcify.
That is the internal biological struggle of the individual. But what makes Ahmed's essay so compelling is that he does not stop at the microscopic level. He takes this exact thermodynamic equation and he scales it up.
And that raises the most massive question of this deep dive. If this is how one human mind dries out, what happens when you scale this up to an entire civilization?
It's terrifying, honestly.
What does it look like and what does it sound like when a whole society lets the smokeless friction take over?
To answer that, we have to move from biology to sociology. We have to look at what Ahmed calls the architecture of arrogance.
Okay, I want to change the sonic landscape for the listener again. Just imagine a sweeping binaural environment. You are no longer listening to the intimate sound of a potter's wheel.
You're outside now.
Yeah, you are standing in the middle of a massive, echoing, hollow canyon. The wind is howling violently through deep gorges, tearing against sheer walls of solid, monolithic rock.
Massive stone structures.
And somewhere in the distance, bouncing off the canyon walls, you hear a faint, eerie ringing sound. Like someone striking the edge of a brittle ceramic bowl. Just ding, ding.
The author brings our attention to a specific sociological domain mentioned in the Quran. They are known as the people of the Rocky Tract, or Al-Ajir.
Who were they, historically?
Historically and archaeologically, we are talking about societies akin to the Nabateans, the civilization that built the ancient city of Petra in modern-day Jordan.
I have seen pictures of Petra. It is unbelievable.
If you have ever walked through the Siq, that narrow canyon leading into the city, it is breathtaking. They literally carved a sprawling metropolis directly into the faces of rose-red sandstone and granite mountains.
From an engineering standpoint, it is the ultimate flex. I mean, they utilize the absolute strongest physical structures available on the crust of the earth.
They didn't build walls out of mud bricks or timber.
Right, materials that could be burned or knocked over, the mountain was the wall.
Think about the psychological trap that kind of engineering creates.
You would feel invincible.
Completely. If you carve your bedroom, your treasury, and your temples out of a solid granite mountain, you feel physically untouchable. No invading army is going to burn your city down. No hurricane is going to blow it over.
So they engineered their physical environment to create a profound illusion of permanence.
The key word there is illusion. Because Ahmed points out that while they obsessed over their material fortification, they completely neglected their ethical architecture.
Oh, wow.
The source text states that they rejected objective signs.
Wait, let's put that in the thermodynamic language we've been using. They stopped absorbing.
Exactly. They lost the first property of clay.
They let the fire of their own arrogance, their wealth, and their physical power run unregulated. And because of that, they lost their malleability. As a society, they became rigid.
They believed that because their stones were hard, they could afford to let their hearts become hard.
They dry themselves out.
They became a society built entirely on extraction, relying on their geographic monopoly of trade routes, fortifying themselves against the outside world while internally rotting from unchecked ego.
So here is the core systems question. If you live inside a literal mountain and you have highly advanced water conduit systems so you can't be starved out, and you are physically invincible from any exterior threat, how does a society like that actually collapse?
It seems impossible.
You cannot siege a mountain.
And history, along with the text, tells us they weren't sieged. Their downfall was not a physical army equipped with battering rams. The text states they collapsed through an acoustic shock.
An acoustic shock. Sound.
Yes, a force that completely bypassed their physical stone defenses.
Let's dig into the physics of that, because this is where the mind-blowing reality of the essay hits. How does sound destroy a mountain city?
It comes down to density.
If I am standing in a field and a loud noise happens, it just dissipates in the air.
Yeah.
But how does sound travel through a solid mountain?
This is the immense irony of their architecture. In physics, the denser the medium, the faster and more efficiently acoustic waves travel through it.
Wait, sound travels faster in rock than in air.
Much faster. Sound travels through air at about 340 meters per second, but it travels through solid rock at nearly 6,000 meters per second.
That is insane.
When you build a wall out of loose soil or mud, the pockets of air and water act as a dampener. They absorb the shock.
Because it has malleability.
Exactly. But when you carve your city into a rigid, continuous lattice of dense rock, you have removed all the dampening. The mountain doesn't shield you from a seismic or acoustic shock wave, it amplifies it.
Oh my God.
The wave travels directly through the stone, turning the entire environment into a violently vibrating tuning fork.
So their greatest strength was actually the conduit for their destruction.
Precisely.
What does this mean for the thermodynamic law of civilization that Ahmed is building?
Ahmed spells it out perfectly. It is a universal law. No amount of material strength can compensate for moral erosion.
That is a heavy sentence.
A civilization that is built on extraction, on arrogance, on the denial of natural law, becomes mathematically brittle. It does not matter how technologically sophisticated their architecture is.
Their downfall wasn't some arbitrary punishment hurled from the sky by a furious god.
No, it was the mechanical consequence of their structural choices.
If you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, okay, but I'm not an ancient civilization carving a city into a mountain, how does this apply to me?
It applies perfectly to the individual.
Think about the last time you refused to admit you were wrong in an argument. Think about when you doubled down on a mistake because your ego wouldn't let you yield. You built a rigid wall to protect yourself. But that rigidity is exactly what makes your relationships fragile.
The brittleness is the danger.
Okay, but I am leaning in so hard right now. Because if they became mathematically brittle, how did that brittleness actually form?
The process itself.
Yeah, what was the chemical and thermodynamic process of a human society hardening into something so fragile that a mere sound wave can shatter it?
This is where we reach the most profound synthesis in the essay. This is what Ahmed calls the formula of calcification.
Let's look at the clay fire equation. In the first part of this deep dive, we talked about humanity's origin. Wet, malleable-sounding clay.
Right.
But the essay connects this beautiful origin to the catastrophic destruction of a completely different society, the people of Lot. The ancient texts say they were annihilated by a rain of stones of hardened clay, or baked clay.
Do you see the symmetry there?
It is brilliant. We start as wet, potential-filled clay, and the corrupt society ends as stones of baked, dead clay.
This isn't just divine retribution. This is a closed-loop thermodynamic system.
Let's define what a closed-loop system is, just to be incredibly clear for the listener.
In thermodynamics, the conservation of mass and energy dictates that in a closed system, nothing is created out of nowhere and nothing is truly destroyed.
Energy and matter just change states.
Exactly. They move from one form to another within the boundaries of the system. Let's dissect the formula of calcification that Ahmed lays out, tracking the state changes step by step.
Okay, we begin with the input.
The input is humanity at its pristine origin. We begin as malleable clay. We have the inherent capacity to absorb knowledge, cultivate ethics, and shape a balanced civilization.
We have our internal moisture, our intellectual flexibility, our neuroplasticity. We are ready to be molded by truth.
But of course, nothing stays pristine forever. So we introduce the catalyst.
What introduces the friction?
The catalyst is the introduction of unregulated heat. A society decides to abandon rational, grounded ethics. Instead, they embrace the unanchored impulses of the John.
They let the smokeless fire take over.
Yes, they normalize predatory desire, rampant ego, the exploitation of the weak, the hoarding of wealth. When a society does this, it exposes its collective clay to intense internal heat.
The background processes are running out of control, generating massive smokeless friction.
Which leads to the transformation. This is where we have to deeply understand the physical process of vitrification.
Okay, vitrification. Think about what actually happens to a beautiful, wet, sculpted piece of clay when you put it in a kiln and crank the temperature up to 2,000 degrees.
The heat literally changes the chemical and molecular structure of the clay body.
First, it drives off the water. The clay loses its moisture.
In our sociological analogy, that means the society loses its empathy, it loses its knowledge, its ability to absorb anything new, it dries out.
Then, as the heat increases, the silica inside the clay actually begins to melt. It fills in all the microscopic pores.
The clay loses its porosity.
It loses its flexibility. It loses its reason. It can no longer adapt or change its mind. It becomes ideologically, politically, and morally rigid.
And finally, it loses its fertility. You cannot plant a seed in a ceramic brick and expect it to grow.
Ethical creativity completely dies. The clay vitrifies. It becomes rock hard, incredibly dense, heavy, and functionally dead.
Which brings us to the output of the closed-loop system. The stones of baked clay that the texts say rain down on the corrupt society.
Right. The stones of baked clay.
Ahmed's breakthrough insight here is structural. These stones were not random meteors conjured out of deep space to punish them.
They weren't.
No, they are the literal physical manifestations of the society's own corrupted potential. They are the hardened, dead remains of what their civilization was supposed to be.
Oh, wow. This changes everything about how we view consequence.
Yeah.
The universe did not invent a weapon to destroy them. It simply returned their own calcified liabilities back onto them.
They generated the heat.
They refused to regulate the fire. They baked their own clay into bricks, and the universe simply handed the bricks back.
It is the ultimate thermodynamic reflection. Energy simply changed states and completed the loop.
Input, catalyst, transformation, output.
And this process of calcification brings us directly back to the acoustic shock that destroyed the Rocky Tract. Because once you become calcified, once you vitrify, lose your moisture, and become a rigid stone, you develop a fatal structural flaw.
And this brings us to the absolute climax of the deep dive. This is where physics and morality intersect in a way I have genuinely never heard before. Let's talk about acoustic resonance.
The essay points out a very specific, carefully chosen word used in the Quran to describe human clay in its final form. The word is adlal.
Allah, what does that mean?
Linguistically, it translates to clay that resonates, rings, or produces a distinct sound when struck.
It is an acoustic property. It is not just describing how it looks or feels, it is describing how it vibrates.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine holding a highly fired, incredibly rigid ceramic bowl. It has been baked until there is no moisture left whatsoever.
If you are listening, I want you to vividly imagine this in your mind's ear. Imagine the pure, sustained tone of a ceramic bowl being struck with a mallet. Just a clear, high-pitched ringing frequency that fills the space around you, vibrating in the air.
When clay becomes overfired, when a human being or a society becomes morally and ideologically calcified, it becomes highly brittle.
It loses all its shock absorption.
It cannot flex. And in the science of physics, every single brittle structure in the universe has what is called a resonant frequency.
Let's explain resonant frequency. Everything has a natural frequency at which it likes to vibrate.
Right.
If you've ever seen those incredible videos of an opera singer hitting the exact right pitch and a crystal wine glass across the room just violently explodes, that is resonant frequency.
The sound wave traveling through the air perfectly matches the natural vibration of the glass.
The glass absorbs that acoustic energy, and because the glass is brittle, because it has zero malleability and cannot bend to absorb the energy, it shatters.
To scale it up to the size of a society, look at the famous collapse of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940.
Oh, that video is terrifying.
It was a massive structure of steel and concrete. But the wind blowing through the canyon that day happened to perfectly match the resonant frequency of the bridge deck.
It wasn't even a hurricane, was it?
No, it was just a steady 42-mile-per-hour wind. But because the frequency matched perfectly, the invisible aeroelastic flutter amplified. The bridge began to violently twist, and the rigid steel and concrete tore itself to pieces.
It was a spectacular failure of a rigid structure against invisible wave energy.
Now hold that thought and come back to the text.
As we discuss this, I want you to imagine that ringing tone of the ceramic bowl slowly increasing in volume. The pitch is getting slightly sharper. It is creating a visceral, almost uncomfortable sense of mounting tension in your ears.
The ancient text describes the destruction of these corrupt, arrogant, mountain-dwelling societies, not with swords, not with invading armies, but with a piercing acoustic shock, a blast.
This is the realization that elevates Ahmed's essay to a masterpiece of synthesis. This isn't myth, it's acoustics.
A shock wave that perfectly matches a brittle object's resonant frequency causes instantaneous, catastrophic structural collapse.
The ringing in your imagination is reaching an unbearable dissonant pitch now. It is vibrating at the absolute limit of the material. A society that is calcified morally, a society that has lost its empathy and become entirely rigid, becomes acoustically fragile.
The universe does not need to build siege engines to destroy an arrogant civilization. It does not need to drop bombs.
It only needs resonance.
Just resonance.
Imagine the sound of that ringing bowl violently shattering into 1,000 pieces, followed by a sudden, deep, echoing, heavy silence.
Sitting in that silence, the intellectual epiphany here is just staggering. When a society becomes rigid, when it refuses to absorb evidence, when it operates purely on ego, extraction, and the smokeless friction of the jaw, it thinks it is becoming strong.
Like the Nabateans living inside the mountain, they think they are turning themselves into diamonds.
But they're actually turning themselves into cheap, highly stressed glass.
And the system, the dynamic thermodynamic universe, will inevitably produce a frequency that shatters them. The clay-fire dialectic is not only biological, it is not only moral, it is acoustic, it is structural, and it is the defining thermodynamic law of civilization.
Let's bring this all together for the final synthesis. What J.R. Ahmed has done in the clay and fire dialectic is take ancient scriptures that the modern scientific world largely dismisses as quaint moral fairy tales, and he has written them as a highly advanced textbook on human thermodynamics.
He has shown that humanity stands perpetually, at every single moment of our conscious lives, caught between two thermodynamic states.
We have the clay, absorbent, malleable, cultivating, rational, structured, and transparent.
And we have the fire, volatile, reactive, unanchored, consuming, and concealed.
The mechanics of choice are literally right there in the physics. What you repeatedly expose your clay to dictates your ultimate structural fate.
If you seek out knowledge, if you practice intellectual discipline, if you admit when you are wrong and allow your mind to adapt, you keep your clay moist.
You stay fertile. You remain capable of growth. You fulfill your role as the Khalifa, managing the system through flexibility.
But if you surrender to your ego, if you let the unregulated desires and the hidden fears run your background processes unchecked, you expose yourself to the smokeless friction.
You slowly bake your own clay into stone.
And sustained corruption turns that stone into a projectile. Systemic collapse is just the thermodynamic return to those projectiles. The closed loop completes itself.
I think the most sobering, paradigm-shifting insight from this entire deep dive is how it forces us to fundamentally re-understand the nature of the universe we live in.
The universe does not punish, it reflects.
It does not magically intervene to strike you down. It responds to the physics of the system you have built.
It does not destroy us. It merely reveals the consequences of what we have already allowed ourselves to become.
It just plays the frequency. And whether we bend like wet clay or whether we violently shatter like baked glass is entirely dependent on what we have made of ourselves. It forces a profound, terrifying level of self-reflection.
It really does. And that is exactly where I want to leave you, the listener, today. We started this sonic journey with the sound of wet, malleable clay on a wheel. The raw, beautiful potential of what your biology and your consciousness are designed to be.
But knowing everything we've just uncovered.
Knowing everything we've uncovered about the physics of morality, about the thermodynamic formula of calcification, and about the terrifying reality of acoustic resonance, I want you to ask yourself one final question as you go about the rest of your day.
What is that question?
If moral calcification creates a fragile, brittle, resonant frequency, what frequency is your personal clay tuned to right now? And what kind of acoustic environment, what media, what voices, what hidden drives, and what unregulated desires are you allowing to ring against it?